Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. We've got a pack house today for our meeting. It's going to be great. Everybody knows we have a very special guest on our meeting today. It is Chuck Surack, the founder of Sweetwater. Without further ado, let's bring on Chuck live on the screen.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. And what an honor to be with you. And frankly, so many of my friends that have logged in. I see dozens of people that I know. So thanks everybody for being here today.
Well, everybody's going to be here. Everybody want to hear from you, how you did it, why you where you are, and that's what we're going to try to figure out, right?
Sure.
So, I want to talk a little bit about how we got to this interview. It started with Richard Ash. We interviewed him 2 months ago, and during that interview, and actually doing the pre-interview when I talked to him privately, there was quite a lot of the conversation was focused on you and Sweetwater and some of the things that you've done. I tried to get it back to Sam Ash many times, but Richard was a huge admirer of yours. And in fact, he even told me to try to sell Sam Ash to you, and you basically wouldn't take it. um, and so I thought, you know what? Let me reach out to you, and you'd actually seen the interview. I just I'm curious, what did you think of the interview?
Well, so many different thoughts. First off, it's just sad to see what happened to the Ash family and Sam Ash. I mean, when I was growing up, I remember many times going to 48th Street, making the trek all the way to New York City from Indiana, which is not a short trip, but you would go there because you could see all of the instruments, all the recording technology. And so it's just really sad to see them go away. As for Richard, we've been friends for many, many years, and it's very humbling. He said some really kind things, and I just really feel for the whole family. That's what I would say.
Yeah. It was really sad, and I really appreciate Richard coming on. Um, and yeah, this is the real question. You started out when Sam Ash and these other companies were already very well established. They're in the industry for decades, and it's really amazing. In a nutshell, how are you able to have existed? How are you able to have succeeded against those giants of our industry? In a nutshell, of course, we're going to get back to it, but give me the morsel of truth right here at the beginning. What do you think it was?
Well, it's a lot of things, but I think the biggest thing, I'm a musician first, and I wanted to treat people the way I would want to be treated. And just we always do the right thing at Sweetwater. We're human, we make mistakes occasionally, but how we handle those mistakes is the big difference. And just one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, and you turn around and you have a lot of great customers and a lot of great employees that are following the lead of Sweetwater. And I'm just very humbled and honored that we've been able to do this over 45 years.
It's amazing. And so tell me a little bit about your upbringing. And did you always play music? Were you from a musical family?
Well, like a lot of people, back in fifth grade, I had the opportunity to learn to play a music instrument, and I wanted to play trombone. And my dad said, "Oh, no, you don't want to play trombone. You want to play saxophone." I said, "Why is that?" And he says, "Oh, saxophone players get all the solos." Now, you have to understand, my dad was an accordion player. He played accordion through college. So I think he was trying to live a little bit vicariously through me. And now, if I really think back about solos, I wish I'd have played guitar, but that's another whole story. But we went to a pawn shop in Columbus, Ohio, and he bought me my first saxophone. And the rest is kind of history. I never took a music lesson and just taught myself how to play and through the school band and all of that.
And your dad was also a musician, but he was a chemical engineer, from what I understand.
He was an entrepreneur, a lot of different things, but his main career was being a chemical engineer. He worked for a Goodyear atomic plant in Southern Ohio, and he was responsible when they did the nuclear reactions to get rid of the heat. But he played accordion on the side and that sort of thing.
Hmm. And then, so you took it seriously. And at what point did you decide you're going to be a musician?
Yeah, all the way through middle school and high school. I played saxophone, eventually taught myself how to play keyboards, and I basically today play every instrument except guitar. I mean, I know how to play some chords, but I would never consider myself a guitar player. But through school, I was going back and forth between being a musician and I wanted to be a pediatrician. I love children, wanted to be a doctor. And immediately after high school, I went on the road as a musician for a year. And well, I thought I would go for a year and ended up doing about almost 5 years. And once the music was bubbling in your blood, there was no turning back. And so never thought about going to medical school at that point, and just music was in my life for the rest of my life.
And then how did you turn that into a business? You got off the road, and we hear the story, of course, of doing recordings. How did you get into recording? Did you teach yourself again?
Yeah, so when I went on the road back in those days, we had music 6 nights a week at lots and lots of clubs, and had booking agents that would hire you. And so we played in a 5 to 6 piece band, 7 piece band for a while. This is back in the disco era, and so you'd play the Holiday Inns and the various Marriott hotels, all those sort of places. And I did that for almost 5 years. But what was interesting is most of the times you'd go into town, you'd be there for a week or a couple weeks, and you needed to record a commercial to say that you're playing at this local restaurant or local club. And in those days, there weren't a lot of recording studios around. You would go to the local radio station. And it was very common that the radio station would have a 4 track or 8 track or even a 16 track recorder. And so we'd record the commercial of our band playing in town that week. And I kind of got into the technology. I was always the guy that would run the audio from the side of the band. I could play saxophone kind of with one hand and run the mixer with the other hand. But I also got to use all the equipment and technology in those radio stations. And through the years, I started gaining equipment. And after 5 years on the road, and having a lot of fun playing in about 45 different states across the country, but also never really making any money, I knew I wasn't going to be a real strong musician. I was good enough to fool people, but I was never going to be a really professional musician. But I had this recording equipment. So I came home with my beat up VW bus that my parents had given me in high school. I literally would pull the bus alongside the school, the church, the nightclub. I'd run 100 feet or 200 feet of microphone cables in, and I would mic up the band, the choir, the preacher. And then I would sit in the bus with my headphones and my reel-to-reel 4 track tape recorder, and I would record the musical performance or the service or the business meeting or whatever. And I would take those recordings then from my VW bus to my very modest 12 by 55 mobile home. And that's where I would edit the tapes in the right order, and you'd send the tapes away and make LPs and eventually cassettes and CDs and all that sort of thing. And that was really the genesis of my recording studio, just helping my friends, helping the local schools make music and sound better than they could really sound in some cases.
Wow. So back then, of course, you're editing with razor blade, and oh my God, when you look back on it, what do you think?
I remember having a client called Super Value grocery stores, and every Super Value had a different, around here, there were about 200 of them, and they had different names. It might be Joe's IGA, Bill's, Super Value, whatever. And we did commercials for them every week when we got into really commercial sort of work. But every one of those tags with a different store name, I would record the main commercial, 27 seconds of the commercial, but the last 3 seconds was a little piece of tape about this long that I would cut and edit. And I was so thankful when Pro Tools and those sort of products came along.
So now, yeah, speaking of that, it's a great segue. Um, you started a recording studio, but back then, of course, it was tape. So that means you had a building. Did you use the trailer? Where did you have the studio?
So I was in the mobile home for a couple of years, and then I finally moved into the west side of Fort Wayne, a small little 1,000 square foot house, and I built a recording studio. It was about a 2 garage size studio, and by then I had moved from the 4 track and 8 track to 16, and eventually we had a 24 track recorder and AMEC console and all that sort of stuff. And it was a real traditional recording studio with separate drum room and separate room for all the keyboards and grand piano and all. And what really changed my business in 1984, a friend of mine came to me who owned the local music store. He had pianos and organs and even some of the Yamaha synthesizers. And he said, "Would you want to go to the NAMM show?" And I said, "What in the heck's the NAMM show?" He says, "Well, that's the National Association of Music Merchants." I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "Well, it's where all the manufacturers show their new products, and it's up in Chicago." I said, "Yeah, I'll go with you." And Chicago is only about 3 hours from Fort Wayne. And so I went to this NAMM show, and I saw a prototype of the Kurzweil K250. And the Kurzweil K250 was the first music instrument that played back digital recordings of other instruments. So it had a 9 foot grand piano. It had a big string section. It had a choir. Of course, the choir could only sing one word, ah, that's all it would sing. But I thought, how cool is this instrument? If I had one of these in my recording studio at the end of every session, I could ask my customers if they'd like to hear their music with those extra sounds. I'd get a little extra billing time and they would get a little better product. So I waited for it to become a real product, and I ended up buying serial number 32. So it was really early in the machine's history. And I brought it back to Fort Wayne. I sold my grand piano that I had and put a few other dollars with it and bought a Kurzweil K250. And I quickly started making my own sounds for it. It had a 68,000 Motorola processor chip in it, the same chip that was in a Macintosh 128 and 512 back then. And I could load my own sounds in and out. I started reverse engineering it with a friend of mine. I started writing additional software, additional sounds. And frankly, I was able to become friends with other K250 owners. There was back in those days, Mix Magazine was actually a newspaper. And every month when it would come out, it would list the studios around various parts of the country, and it would list the equipment they have. They had an Atari 24 track, an MCI console, and they had a Synclavier, or they had a Kurzweil, or they had whatever. And I would call everyone that had a Kurzweil and say, wow, you have one, I have one too. It was kind of a brotherhood, and it was pretty easy to get to other Kurzweil owners. And so I started the Sweetwater sampling network, where I would make sounds and copy them on the 3.5-inch discs, and I would trade them or sell them to my friends. And it grew to where I became friends with Stevie Wonder and Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton and all these really famous old musicians, just helping them with sounds for their music.
Now, where did this Sweetwater, what's the name? Where did that come from?
Ah, that's a big question. I've asked every marketing person that's ever worked for me to come up with a better story. But, honestly, the story was when I was out in that mobile home out in the country, my company was called C&B Audio. It stood for Chuck and Brenda. Brenda was my first wife. I consider that one of my two failures in life. You don't marry your high school sweetheart thinking you're going to get divorced, but we did. But as I moved into the city, I knew I didn't want to be C&B Audio or Chuck and Brenda Audio. So I needed a new name for the company. And I had property that had 2 acres of land. It had a little creek in the backyard, our little river, if you will. And I was trying to think, what could I do for a name? And I go, water, that's kind of sweet. And so I put Sweetwater on a piece of paper, and that became the name of the company from that point forward. Interestingly enough, we registered Sweetwater.com way back in 1994. It was one of the very first, if not the first, music sites on the internet, and specifically the first music retailer. We didn't sell anything for several years, but we did get on the website, get the website URL registered right away. But that's where it came from.
Wow. So, but Chuck, you've always been in technology. I remember you back in the day. I used to use the Kurzweil 250 as well. I made a lot of money on that thing. Um, but you're always on this technology side, computers and things. But you're a sax player. It's usually the keyboard players are the ones that are. How did you become so sort of enamored with the technology side and the MIDI and the computers and the digital audio?
I'm very fortunate. I didn't go to college, but I'm pretty educated, and I learn fast. I read fast. I read a lot. In our city, we needed 31 credit hours to graduate high school. I graduated with 62. I took summer school classes for the enjoyment part of it. I graduated with so much music, it was crazy. And I just always have been around technology. I've always liked it, and it's pretty easy for me to understand.
Hmm. Now, so you have this Kurzweil K250. The technology back then, of course, I remember this time it was growing leaps and bounds every month. There's something astounding coming on. You find out from buying the Electronic Musician or Keyboard Magazine and so on. How did you make the leap from, sort of enthusiast, tech guy, recording studio to retail?
Sure. So I'm making all these floppy disks for my friends, and I'm sort of frustrated because I'm trying to run my recording studio, and we're doing lots of local advertising jingles, a lot of bands coming in, and I really love the producing side of the music, helping people sound better than they probably really would sound. And I'm almost frustrated that people are wanting me to make these discs for them for their Kurzweil house. And one day, finally, enough was enough. And I hired my first employee to help run the recording studio, and I'm copying floppy disks. And you have to remember when the 128 and 512 Mac came out, there was no hard drive.
Yeah.
There wasn't even a second floppy drive for a while. And so to copy a disk was 52 disk swaps where you'd stick your system disk in and they would grind on it a while. They'd pop it out and then you put your disk you're trying to copy in and back and forth and back 52 times in and out to make one copy of a 400K disk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, eventually, of course, external floppies came and then hard drives came. And I found myself so busy helping all my friends with sounds. And next thing you know, I started becoming friends with the Kurzweil representative. He happened to live in Southern Indiana. And he'd come by to get some of my sounds and take them to his other dealers. And he had some pretty big dealers up in Cleveland and in Chicago and up in Wisconsin. And he'd take my sounds and occasionally he'd bring back some sounds for me. And I kept asking him technical questions because I had friends that I was sending sounds to. And the more I asked the questions, he kept saying, why don't you become a parts dealer? If you remember, the Kurzweil K250 had 3 screws in the back. You could pull those screws out. The drawer would pop open, kind of like a Motorola works in the drawer, and you could plug additional sounds into it via EEPROM chips or ROM chips, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And you could plug in RAM memory and all kinds of things. And to make a long story short, I eventually acquiesced and became a dealer for Kurzweil parts. And I'll never forget that first Christmas. And he says, hey, if you order parts before the end of the year, we have a special discount. So I put together a dot matrix newsletter. I sent it to my friends. I had about 300 Kurzweil friends now around the country and said, if you want a new sound block for your Kurzweil or you want sampling and that sort of thing, I can have all these options available and I'll give you a special deal if you do it before the end of the year. Next thing you know, I start getting checks left and right. This is before we even did credit cards online. I didn't do anything online at that point. It was all by mail. And it was a couple of days before Christmas, and my friend, the rep, calls and he says, hey, I need to get that order in. How many orders do you have? And I said, well, I have a lot. I haven't figured it out. I'm really busy right now. He said, well, I need to know roughly. I said, I don't know. I'm busy doing Christmas albums and I'm recording in my studio. And the Kurzweil thing's sort of a second thought. And he calls, I'll call you after Christmas. So he calls me the day after Christmas and he says, how many orders do you have? I don't know, maybe a couple $100,000 worth. And he says, what? I said, a couple $100,000 worth. All my friends literally had checked off every option. Sound block A was $1,995. Sound block C, the drums were $1,300. The horn block was 17, all these, and they were adding up to $6, $8, and $10,000. And I had several $100,000 of parts orders. He says, I'll come up tomorrow and help you figure it out. And so he came up, we figured it all out, and it was just under $300,000 of my initial order of Kurzweil parts. And so I order all those parts, and he was really worried that I'd have the money. I said, oh, yeah, I got the checks in advance. I mean, everybody sent me checks. And then in January, all those parts started coming in. I told all my friends I'd help them put them in. And so most of the stuff was pretty user installable. I got flown around the country to put some parts and new software in some people's machines and all that. But I spent the month of January and February installing all this stuff that I had sold in the last couple of weeks of December. And doing really well. And it was only a month or so later, and I get a call from a fellow in Loyola University down in New Orleans, and a very famous musician. He says, hey, I want to buy another Kurzweil. I said, whoa, another Kurzweil? I just sold you almost $20,000 of parts. What do you want another one for? And I'm so naive. He says, no, Chuck, you don't understand. I orchestrate, and I have to hire full orchestras. And he said, if I had another Kurzweil, instead of 12 notes of polyphony, I could do 24 notes of polyphony. That's closer to an orchestra. I literally am counting my fingers and I'm going, 10 fingers. Why do you need more than, And he says, no. And he's trying to explain all this to me. And I said, okay, you're kind of weird, but let me see what I can do. So I call the factory and call my rep to the factory. And I said, hey, I want to buy a K250. I got some guy that wants to buy a whole new machine. He said, oh, Chuck, you have to be a dealer. I only set you up for parts. You haven't become a dealer for the Kurzweil instrument itself. And the opening order of that is 3 instruments. I said, oh, well, thanks anyway. So I call my friend back. Sorry, Steve, I can't help you, but I'll keep you in mind. It isn't a week later. I get another call from somebody else who wants a full Kurzweil. And I'm thinking, wow, those 2 guys want one. And if I bought those 2, I can get the third one basically for free. So I call up the rep again. And this is where I learned that some reps deserve the title of reptile. And I said, Bruce, guess what? I've got 3 Kurzweils. So I've got 2 sold and I'll get the third one for myself. And he says, no, I told you the opening order was 10. And I'm in tears. I'm going, oh my gosh, 10, what am I getting? And I learned the term split shipment. And so I took a little bit of a gamble and ordered 10 of them. We spread it out over several months. And next thing you know, I'm filling the living room of my house up with these Kurzweils. And they're the size of a casket. I mean, 88 note wooden keyboard. They come in huge boxes, and I could stack them 3 or 4 high and about 4 wide. And then the semi trailer would
don't forget how heavy they were.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Although you could carry one under your arm. If you had a long enough arm, you could lift it on its side and carry it by yourself on the side. But the semi-trailer would back out of my front yard and then back down the hill. I told you 2 acres of land. I had a little horse barn, and we would move the horse over to the side and fill the rest of the barn up with K250s. And then over the next couple months, I would sell them like they were going out of style. And the people that appreciated it understood what a great instrument it was. So that was really the beginning of retail.
That's amazing. At that time, the sound. I still remember the piano and the wooden keys. It was the closest thing we had to a real piano. It was digital, and you had MIDI. How did MIDI transform your whole recording and the whole industry from your perspective?
Well, fortunately, I was there right at the groundbreaking of MIDI 1.0, probably actually before 1.0, but it was just used in everything that we did. I mean, literally everything we did. Whether it's layering instruments or making your recorder run in sync, just everything was done with MIDI. Today we take it for granted. In fact, it's quite often not even used, but it was the universal way to connect everything to make it all work. Man, talking about that piano array, I still have a Kurzweil K250 in my home studio. And yeah, it doesn't have reverb and it doesn't have, lots of notes of polyphony, but the way that piano sounds and the way it works with its channel stealing algorithm, it's still an incredible sounding instrument. Designed back in 1983. It just blows me away.
Exactly, and the string sound and the choir.
Yep.
It's amazing. I love that issue. I still have the rack version, which is about, I don't know, 8U high.
That was the heaviest, biggest rack of any synthesizer I've ever seen.
Exactly. It's still the
They
record.
literally, they literally took the same three big circuit boards out of the K250 keyboard and just stacked them on top of each other and put it in this heavy metal rack with a big fan on it. It was the weird. They called that more portable, but I don't think it was 70 pounds. I don't think it was more portable.
And you know what's funny? We had a K250, the big one, and we had the rack, and we used to call the rack the little guy. That was
Yeah,
the name for it, which
yeah.
is ironic.
So
It was a huge guy. So you start retail, uh, but you're a one trick pony. You're only selling Kurzweil. How did it grow beyond that?
I was, yeah, and even then, I still wasn't sure I wanted to be in retail because I really liked doing music and playing and that sort of thing. But uh, one of those customers called me one day and said, I understand you can do sheet music on the computer. And I said, yeah, I know how to do that. I'm already doing that in my own studio. I'd already written my own computer programs to do cassette labels and to do studio invoicing. And so I got into the whole MIDI, with the MIDI interface and long before Digital Performer, it was just Performer. Actually, it was Composer and then Performer, and there was Total Music and some other programs back then. And then eventually Opcode came with Vision and then Studio Vision. But I was a Performer guy and said, yeah, I know how to do sheet music on the computer. I'm already doing that in my studio. And so I became a dealer for the sheet music and the MIDI interfaces. And then one day I got a call about recording equipment. So I became a Tascam dealer and then a Fostex. And that was 1990. And I finally had 5 people working for me, operating out of my house. And I decided enough was enough. And I was going to move to a new commercial building. So I hired a realtor and I said, I like this end of town where we are in Fort Wayne. And so he said, well, get in the car. I found a place for you. I said, where is it? I'm not going to tell you. Just get in my car. So I got in his car and we literally went about a half a mile down the road and found 13 acres of land. And I built my first 5,000 square foot building. And then I built a house up at the top of a hill. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to live where I worked. But that house was only about a football field away. And I wasn't even so sure that I was going to like walking outside to go to work every day. I thought about putting a tunnel underground. I never did do that. But eventually we did put a breezeway so you could walk from my house down to the business. And we were there from 1990 until 2006 when we moved into our current building where we are today. But it's an amazing story.
So you didn't have any fear of failure, or you didn't worry about taking on such a big expense. I mean, how old are you? You're a young guy at that time, right?
Yeah, I was in my 20s. You
So
know what I would say, and I've always said this, that anything's possible and failure is not an option. I believe so much of our success is based on our attitude. And so we really try and encourage, well, I'm always encouraged myself, but I always try and encourage others. There's always a way. Just keep plowing forward and you will be successful. And failure is not an option. We stayed in that building from 1990 till 2006. We grew from the 5 employees that I moved in with to we had 225 employees when we moved out in 2006 and moved to our building on Leesburg or on Highway 30. Sorry, Highway
Hmm.
30. That was a 40,000 square foot building. It was pre-existing. It was already there. It had been the headquarters for North American Van Lines, the moving company. And at the same time, we built a 35,000 square foot warehouse. And those two were two separate buildings. And we operated that way for a couple of years until we eventually connected them together with a big mall area. And then we added a sales department and we've added on and on and on. And you get to today and we have nearly 1 million square feet under roof. We have 160 acres of land we're sitting on. And it's just extraordinary to me to think that we have, nearly 3,000 employees. And I started it very humbly in a beat up, rusty old VW bus. My bus was so bad. My mom had wrecked it, ran it into a telephone pole, had a big V down the middle of it, and she'd blown the engine up. So I filled it with 2 gallons of Bondo. I put headlights on from Tractor Supply that looked like bug eyes. I rebuilt the motor, and then I spray painted the bus. This is no joke, with 99-cent cans of blue spray paint from Kmart,
Oh my
which, by the
God.
way, I saw the last Kmart. There's only one Kmart left in Miami today. It's all that's left in the whole country. But in those days, we had several Kmarts in Fort Wayne. I bid 99-cent cans of paint to paint it. And it grew
Wow.
to what Sweetwater is today.
Wow. And what about that business plan? Did you ever write down a business plan? I was just
I'm
a
not
joke. I was just a joke.
I'm not real good at that kind of stuff. I just know that we're going to keep moving forward, and again, 45 years later, every year has been better than the year before because failure is not an option and anything's possible. I've been ceremoniously remembered back in the 2008, 9, 10 recession.
Hmm.
That's when General Motors had filed bankruptcy. I was on the board of directors of a local bank that was actually on a publicly traded bank. And we were having to call people's business loans due. And some of the loans were even current, but the federal people said, oh, you have too much in this category or that category. And there's a lot of bankruptcies going on. I came back, and it was really a sad time. I did not like being on a bank board. That's another whole story. But I came back to Sweetwater that afternoon, and I pulled all the employees together. At that time, it was about 230 employees into our theater. And I said, as arrogant as this sounds, I'm choosing to not participate in the recession. I don't want you to be looking over your shoulder for a job. I've never laid anybody off. To this day, I've never laid anybody off. I want you to be thinking about moving forward, not moving backwards. I don't want you to be thinking about working somewhere else. Let's just focus on the basics, take care of customers, do the right thing, and we'll be okay. And, I will tell you that year we took on some new lines that we had never done. We started selling drums as an example. We became a Yamaha custom shop dealer right away, and then eventually other brands. And we hired lots of great people. As other companies were laying folks off, it was just great to hire great people. And we got through that year and didn't go backwards. It didn't go forward very far, but we didn't lose money. And so just very thankful in 45 years. We just always drive the business, drive the business.
And is it as simple as, because I remember coming to Sweetwater and seeing a sign that says, always do the right thing.
Yep.
Is it really that simple, Chuck, or is it something inside of you, or you have some kind of superpower?
No, I don't have any superpower. I'm like everyone else. I put my pants on the same way, take my shirts off the same way. What I would say when I was a young guy, I was in Boy Scouts.
Hmm.
My second failure, I told you my first one was the divorce. Actually, my first one was Scouts. My second one was my divorce. But my first one was Boy Scouts. I had all the required merit badges to be an Eagle Scout. I had everything done except I had to do an Eagle project. And an Eagle project means like picking trash up along the road or building park benches or all that. Well, at age 14, I met my first girlfriend, and so I never got my Eagle Award, even though I have all the required merit badges. But
Oh.
scouting learns, a scout learns to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, clean, brave, and reverent. Amazing principles to live by personally, but I think they're even more amazing to live by professionally. And so I've always run my company that way, to be trustworthy, to be loyal, to be helpful. I won't go through the whole list. You can Google it. But and just always do the right thing, leave things better than you found it, treat people the way you'd want to be treated. And those are just really common sense, good principles, but that's what we do. We make mistakes, as I said earlier, at Sweetwater, but how we handle those mistakes are the difference. We're going to call up and say, we're sorry. We're going to fall on the sword and do whatever it takes to make it right. I've empowered everyone in our company. I don't care whether you're a receptionist or sweeping floors or tech support. If you think there's something we need to do for a customer, we will do it. They will do it. And you will never hear at our company, I need to talk to a manager first. I just think that's crazy. I hire great people. I train them well. And and we make sure that they can just handle whatever it needs to be done for the customer. If that means the receptionist is going to replace a keyboard or bring a guitar, but whatever we're going to do, everyone in the company is empowered to do the right thing for the customer.
Now that's a great time to talk about guitars because you told me you struggled to be a guitar player. I also struggled to be a guitar player. I started with guitar actually, but I could never be as good as even my older brother, so I just gave up very very young. Um, when you started to sell guitars, Richard on this same meeting 2 months ago said he laughed. um, they aren't laughing now. What? Why did first of all? Why did you go into guitars? It's not your thing.
No, it's not my thing, but as we were growing, I kept having customers over and over asking to buy guitars from us. And most of my staff, unlike me, most of my staff did play guitar. And it just, there was a lot of push and pressure. Like, I'm buying everything, all the technology from you, Chuck. Why are you making me go to store XYZ to buy guitars? And Richard was not it was not unusual what Richard said. Most people said you can't sell a guitar online. And I thought about that. And there were a couple of things that were running through my head. I looked at the really, really high-end guitars, maybe the kind of guitars that Groom Guitars or some of the other collectible places sell. Customers don't walk into that store usually, and they're buying the guitar sight unseen, but they trust Grun, or they trust some of the other collectible sort of play. Elderly's up in Michigan as an example. I also looked at how you buy a custom home. If you build a custom home, you don't know what your home's like until it's built. You may see other homes that builder has built. You may see some plans, but you don't know what the home is until it's really built. The same thing if you buy a high-end car. You might see a representative of a low-end version, but if you customize it and put all the options the way you want, whether it's a Porsche or a Ferrari or whatever, you don't know what it is till you get it. Well, I was convinced that we could sell guitars, but the way we would sell guitars is to really make sure that guitar was great out of the box for the customer. So we were going to completely QC the guitar. A lot of people thought this was marketing hype, but it's a fact. We have dozens and dozens of people that open up every guitar that comes in that's over $400 today, and we make sure that it's as perfect as it can be. And again, we'd find blemishes, we'd find pickups installed slightly wrong, the frets, the frets were wrong, or maybe the way that the nut was groove was not right, and we would fix the ones that we could fix, and the ones we couldn't fix, frankly, we'd send back to the factories. And in the early days, we got a lot of flack from the manufacturers because we were sending too many back, and they would tell us they're sending them to our competitors. And I would say, that's fine. If you want to send them to our competitors and let them sell seconds, I won't sell this guitar unless it's the standards that I want to see for myself and for my customers. And so we QC every guitar. We take really good close-up pictures so you can see the wood grain. As you know, the majority of the guitars are all handmade. Many of them, you can look at 20 guitars and the wood's going to be different on every one of those guitars. Maybe you want one with more wood grain. Maybe you want one with less wood grain. And so we show all those pictures and down to the serial number online. And we went from selling no guitars to, we'll sell, I don't know, 350,000 or more this year. 350,000 guitars. I don't even know where they all go. I mean, 1,000 a day. It's crazy.
That's
But it's all because
incredible.
the customers can trust us. And if they get the guitar and any reason they don't like it, we'll take it right back. And I'll turn it around and sell it as a B stock or a demo to the next customer. And also think about all of our guitars. You've been to our building. They're in a humidity controlled warehouse. So we know the moisture levels at the right level for wooden instruments, whether it's guitars or acoustic pianos that we sell today. And you contrast that to many local stores, not all, but many local stores are in a strip center or a shopping center where they don't have control of the kind of things that I've mentioned, humidity and temperature and all that. And they're on the wall. And so people come in and kids put belt buckle scratches on the back. They've not been tuned or set up well. We make sure that out of box experience is as good as it can be. So when you open up that guitar, you can hear it in the beauty of your living room or your studio or whatever. And it hasn't been touched except for the person who built it and our own QC people. And so the out of box experience is really good. Again, it's not that we don't make a mistake once in a while, but we'll take care of it if we do. But in general, it makes a much better product. I'm also thankful that it's caused the guitar manufacturers to improve their game. And so today, any guitar you get from Fender or Gibson or Paul Reed Smith, are a little bit better than they used to be because we've set our standards high and they've gone back in and figured out how to make their standards even better, put better lights in or maybe an extra line of QC. And some of the guitar lines have always been great. Some have had, questionable quality. So it's just been great to see all that improve.
And there was nobody accounting or finance at Sweetwater that came to you quietly, respectfully, and say, "Hey, Chuck, this is going to be too expensive to do"?
Well, the good thing about owning the company myself, they might have whispered it among themselves, but very seldom would they come share that with me. But our team gets it. They understand, and we were fortunate that we got enough volume going that we could afford to do those things. So every guitar we'd spend 40 minutes or so QCing it before we'd sell it. But we had enough economy of scale working for us, we could do that. Yeah, it's expensive. I mean, it costs us more money to do that. Think about the ones we have to send back or the ones we have to put extra labor
Mm-hmm.
into. But I think it's worth it, and it's the only way I want to sell products to my customers. And that loyalty to our customers is what's caused them to be loyal to us. And that really is part of that whole formula that you talked about, why they're so loyal to us.
Mm-hmm. Now, speak to me about online. You went online really, really early. You were even doing mail order very early. Why did you go that way rather than like the other model of 200, 300 stores spread across the United States?
Oh, it's way easier doing what we did back then. I'm not sure it would be easier today, but it was just I couldn't imagine opening stores and having the right staff. And, my hat's off to Guitar Center and Sam Ash as well as they have done it. It's really hard to do that. I had more control by keeping everything under one roof, being in the middle of the United States, shipping. I can get to a good part of the country in 1 or 2 days. And most recently, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, actually, we opened a warehouse in Arizona. So now we can serve the West Coast in a day or two. But I just loved having control of everything. And you start having multiple stores like that. It's just really, all the people on this call today that have multiple stores, my hat's off and a lot of respect to you because I'm not sure I would know how to do that. So it was just good. It was a good way to do business, to really have control, to make sure everything was going to be right for the customer. You did talk about, getting involved early. We did have a website early, as I mentioned, in 1994, but for several years, we didn't sell on the website. Our website was all about education, how to use the products, how to connect them, how to use that MIDI we talked about, all those sorts of things. It was several years till we finally started selling online. But even then, most of our business was on the telephone. It took a long time to where more of our business was online than it is on the phone. But even today, we still have 650 people that are on the phone answering calls, answering questions, all that, as well as all of our tech support people. And that's another, I don't know, 30 or 40 people.
So tell me about this model, because of course it had to get to this. I don't know too many other stores, if any, that has this model of outreach. You have sales engineers and they have customers, and they outreach to those customers. Where did that come from?
Well, it kind of came from way back in the K250 days. I'd just call in and check on my friends, and they go, "Oh, thanks for calling. I wanted to get some new sounds or whatever." And it was really about having a relationship, and that's how I grew up. That's what I've done. Everything in my life is having a relationship with people, and that's what we wanted. We don't look at a sale. In fact, we don't really care about making one sale or one transaction. We want to have a relationship with the customer so we get the repeat business, we get the loyalty, so on and so forth. And so we call all of our customers depending on their interests and their buying patterns, or if they tell us not to call. But frankly, musicians like to talk about their gear and what they're doing. And it's pretty easy to call them at least twice a year. Sometimes we call them once a month, once a week, depending again on their interest in buying pattern. We'll tell them about new things that have come out or just ask them how they're doing. And even with the relationship, we quite often know spouse's name and dog's name and children's name and birth dates and all those kind of things that frankly a local store should be able to do really well. I don't want to diss on local stores. I love local stores, but I can't tell you, I'm sure you're in the same boat, how many times we've gone into a local business, not even a music business, just any local business. You can get in and out of the store and they don't even offer to help you. They don't know anything about you. They don't know why you walked in the store. I always said that if the other stores really had their A game on, Sweetwater would not have had a chance. But they opened the door, maybe literally and figuratively, to allow us to be successful by not look, if a customer walks into your local store and you're showing them a keyboard and you can't sell it and they walk out, it's not because of price. For a long time we sold only at the manufacturer's list price. I remember in the early days I'd get in trouble. The manufacturers thought we were getting sales because we were undercutting. I said, no, call and check on us. We're selling at your MAP price or your list price. We're selling because we can add extra value. We have a 2-year warranty. We have technical support. We have all these things. We know what we're talking about. And all those things helped us make the sale. It wasn't that we were cheaper. In fact, with the infrastructure we have, we can't be cheaper.
Wow. Now, let's talk about your CRM, because another thing that Richard had mentioned was that you had told him about this thing called CRM, and he asked you, "What is that?" Now,
Customer relationship management software. Yes.
now, how did you get into that so deeply so early, Chuck? What
Yeah.
how did you see that?
Of course, today everybody knows about CRM, but this is way back in 1985, 86. The Macintosh came out in January of 84. And I've got all my friends, and even just keeping track of 300 friends. What upgrade did I sell them for their Kurzweil? What version of software do they have in it? What was their spouse's name? What's their phone? All that stuff was hard to keep track of. And so I had an early program, really more of a spreadsheet called Microsoft Works. And in Microsoft Works, you could put 255 characters, which meant that wasn't very many words. That's 255 letters. And if you filled up one field, I would do a second field and a third field. I had multiple fields where I could keep track of my customers like that. I had to. There were just so many. And then eventually it went from Microsoft Works to Claris FileMaker. And we did that for a while. And then I outgrew FileMaker. It only had a limit of so many people that could be logged on and that sort of thing. And we tried a couple of different custom projects. We started writing something in C and some other languages, and eventually went to a program called 4D. And frankly, to this day, our company is still based around 4D. It's a company out of France, and we do everything about our company in this CRM. We know who you are before we answer the phone. We know how much business we've done, the total business we've done with you, the margin, all that sort of stuff. But everything from the company, from running the catalog to how it interfaces with FedEx and UPS and helping the salespeople, and all those tools are all built into this custom 4D system. We have millions and millions of lines of code and frankly, millions of dollars invested in this today. But I will also say you can also go buy Salesforce and other programs off the shelf. The technology just wasn't available when I started with this back in 1985, 6, and 7. But today there's a lot of programs that do very similar stuff to what we do.
Hmm. And of
I
course,
can't
that
I can't imagine having any business today, and I have about 20 other businesses, and every one of them, whether it's an aviation business or music school, all of them use some sort of CRM to keep track of their business and their clients. You just have to. The idea of a paper invoice is just crazy to me.
mhm. And of course, that allows and enables the sales engineers to really do their job effectively and efficiently,
Absolutely. Yeah.
having that CRM. Now, I always wondered, people ask me the same question: Why did you not move to Los Angeles, Ray, or why did you stay in Canada? And I'm going to ask you, why did you stay in Fort Wayne? Fort Wayne is a small place. Indiana is a small state. Um, is that part of your superpower, being in Fort Wayne, Indiana? How important is
It's,
being in
I do think
Indiana?
it has its pluses and maybe a few minuses, but Indiana is basically central to the part of the United States. There's a strong work ethic here with our people. It's also one of the few cities in the Midwest that's growing. We've been very careful to grow. So most Midwest cities are going the wrong way with population. We've been able to grow our population. We're 3 hours from Chicago. We're 2 from Indianapolis. We're 3 from Detroit, 3 from Columbus, Ohio. We're kind of in the middle of all of it. We have minor league sports. We have the oldest hockey franchise in the whole country, the Fort Wayne Komets. We've got a great baseball stadium got built, number one minor league baseball stadium, 13 out of the last 15 years. And it's a great place to raise children. It's a great place for your family, a lot of stuff to do. And again, you're only a few hours away from some of the big cities if you need to. But it's just been great. And it's my home. And FedEx built a big hub in Indianapolis. UPS has a big hub and distribution center in Louisville. So they also saw the value of being in the Midwest part of the United States. We can get to something like 38% of the population in one day from here. Sometimes in the older days, it was hard to get people to move here from California or Nashville or even New York. But as the world has changed, and I think people are fleeing from California about as fast as they used to want to go to California. So we're hiring people from all over the country today. And of course, our reputation has helped. But we have no problem. Again, we have nearly 3,000 employees. It's worked out really well for our company. You think about some of the business disadvantages of being in some of those other states. We've got a lot of business advantages. We have a structure with our government that's really strong and really pro-business, and taxes are low, and buying homes, it's one of the most affordable places in the country to buy homes. And you put all that together, it's a great place to live. And I'd say, why not Indiana? Why not Fort Wayne?
Ah, great answer. Um, COVID. Of course,
COVID.
we all remember this. This was a big plus for some companies and a big minus. How was it going through COVID at Sweetwater? What was that like?
Yeah, well, ultimately, let me start at the beginning. Back in the fall of 2019, we were putting the finishing touches on our 650,000 square foot warehouse. We'd never had a warehouse that big before. We'd had 40,000 square feet. We'd had two 40,000 square foot, but we had a 650,000 square foot warehouse that was being built,
Wow.
and it was just about done in the fall. And we went to all the vendors and said, "We're hoping this thing will be done in the middle of February. Let's fill it up." And so we started getting inventory in, and it was just a miracle and a blessing that we were able to fill that building in February, having no idea that March would come along and we'd have COVID. But we were full of inventory, and we started shipping some orders out in February. And March comes, COVID comes, and the whole country, whole world shuts down. And for a couple of weeks, we literally had no employees in our building. But our governor, back to this being a pro state to do business in, our governor said, no, mail order and distribution centers should be open. If those places stay open, that allow the rest of the people to stay home and get their products from home. So he encouraged us and other businesses around the state to open up. And so we opened up much earlier than our competitors could. And so Guitar Center in California or Sam Ash in New York couldn't open. And Amazon was only shipping the very, very essential stuff. For about 3 months, we were the place to buy music instruments, and we could ship them legally and safely and all that. For a few more weeks, the rest of my employees couldn't come in, but my wife and my daughter, who was 13 at the time, and myself, we'd go in at 5 in the morning, desperate and panicked to ship as much as we could ship because the orders were coming in everywhere. And our leadership team, and we would work till midnight, 1 in the morning, and go back and do the same thing. Man, oh man, I got so much respect for those employees and getting finger cuts from razor blades and all that I probably would have never done. The other thing that it did, because it was a brand new warehouse, anytime you open a new thing, there's new stuff to be discovered. And all my leadership team, all the executives and all the folks in our leadership were out there working in the warehouse, and we were finding things to make better or to perfect.
Hmm.
If that would have been my regular employees, it might have taken years for us to get that information, but we were able to do it in real time. There were many times, just even as simple as the way the packing tables were built, I would go back after working all day, and I'd go to my desk at 11 o'clock at night, and I would take pictures and lay out what I want the desk to look like tomorrow. And tomorrow I'd
Hmm.
go in and reconfigure my desk and try it again, and I'd do it again the next night. And eventually I came up with this standard of how you process the order across the packing table and all that. Those kind of things would have not happened had it just been a regular way to open. Well, anyway, eventually employees came back, and through that summer and through the next year and a half, our business grew 40% a year. And it was on pretty big numbers already. But it was everything from essential items. We were helping schools and churches broadcast their services so people could stay at home. We were helping hospitals with all kinds of recording equipment and special cables and connectors and hard drives and all kinds of stuff. And musicians were buying instruments. People were playing guitar and piano that always wanted to learn how. They were now staying at home and learning to do that. And it was just a phenomenal couple of years for our company. And once those customers are our customers, they tend to stay really loyal. Now, they didn't all keep playing, but many of them kept playing and keep buying. And to this day, the overall market is bigger for us than it was even back in 2020.
Yeah, and I can report. I mean, it was a phenomenal time for us as well. And with you, um, you have any idea how much your business grew with Exchange from 2019 to 2020?
No, but maybe you can tell me. It's a lot, I know. But it is, you said this early on. It is so cool. I think it's closer to 50% of our business happens through the night. How cool is that you get money coming in and you're not even there?
While
I
you're
like a lot
sleeping,
of that.
while
I
you're
like a lot
sleeping,
of that. Yeah, that's right.
140% from
Wow.
2019 to 2020.
Yeah,
And a
it's
lot of
amazing.
that was
Thank
at
you.
night.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And we're talking, 7 figures here, Stark. That's pretty good.
It's a
At
lot of
night. I'm
profit.
talking at night.
Yeah.
All right. So, this is an incredible time. You, everybody says you are one of the most impressive people in our industry, one of the nicest guys. I had breakfast with you yesterday, and you walked in. We walked into a little breakfast place. You lined up like everybody else. We took a seat. We had a meal. You shook a few hands. You said hello. You left. You're still a very normal guy, but you've been huge success. Um, you built an incredible business, a business that people only dream of. And then, Chuck, you sold your baby.
Yeah.
Why? How? Why did you sell it?
That's a great question. It's a long answer. I'll try and make it as short as I can, but I loved what I did. I love what I still do to this day. I thought I would die at my desk and die greeting customers. I really did. I just loved it. I will tell you that the COVID period and Black Lives Matter and all the social unrest was a pretty trying year for me. The worst year of my business. I mean, even though we grew like crazy, it was just a really stressful year. But more importantly, I was trying to figure out what to do when my wife and I both die, and we have a real problem in our country with estate taxes. I can't imagine being a farmer where all your value is tied up in the land, and now all of a sudden you both die and you got to give 40% of the value of that to the government, even though we've already paid millions and millions and millions of dollars through the years with all the employees and all the property taxes and all that stuff. We had to figure out how to pay taxes when we both die. Now, I don't expect to die soon, but I also wanted to be prepared. And my three children didn't seem to have an interest in the business. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I knew it was going to be a big tax bill, and I didn't want to leave that burden to the employees, and I didn't want to leave to even my family members. And so I'm trying to figure out what to do. And so for 3 years, we brought in all kinds of experts to figure out what to do and what is the value of the business and so on and so forth. And really difficult stuff. And finally, after one of the theories that I heard was what's called irrevocable trust, where you kind of put the business in another form of ownership where you don't really own it anymore. Well, that's kind of silly. I've worked so hard to grow this thing, and now I'm going to put it in some business or some other ownership that I don't own. And I said, well, if that's going to happen, maybe we should just sell the business. And my leadership team looked at me and scoffed. I said, I don't know. We're just exploring all the options. Let's explore it and see what happens. And so that's what we did. We brought in four of the big companies, JP Morgan and Baird and a couple others. And I listened to their presentations and understand we were really successful. I had no interest really in selling it, but I was trying to figure out a tax strategy. And eventually JP Morgan said, look, we could put this thing together. We'll go out and shop the business and you can decide not to sell it and get to the end. And I said, that's maybe what I'll do because I really love what I do. So I don't know that I'll follow through. And he said, if you do, all you do is pay us for the time that's been involved, but you don't have to pay a sales transaction fee or anything. So we put a book together. We sent this book is basically an overview of the company. We sent it out to 32 different capital firms. 16 of them came back and had really high offers. I threw 10 of them out because I wasn't going to do business with people that, I either didn't trust, didn't know, didn't like, whatever. And I'd set some pillars in place that were really important to me, that the company needed to stay in Fort Wayne. They had to respect our sales process, respect our employees. And frankly, they had to continue to donate to the nonprofits like we had. We'd been donating for years and years to over 600 nonprofits. And I narrowed it down to two. And frankly, loved both of the companies. And ultimately, it was so much money. And they assured me that the business would stay operating the same. And they just want to help us grow faster, bigger, and better. And I had always grown in sequential, one thing at a time. I'd come up with a new idea, get that done, and then go to the next one and the next one. They were willing to have us grow more in parallel. And I'll explain that in a minute. But eventually I did do a deal, and it allowed my wife and I to take a lot of money off the table, put a lot of money into a foundation, and yet we still own a big majority of Sweetwater. We're the largest individual shareholder of Sweetwater, not the majority, but the largest individual shareholder. And 3 years and a couple months later, the company's still doing really well. But what it allowed us to do, which maybe this is where my limit was, we did stuff in parallel. So we opened up a warehouse on the West Coast. Even though I'm a saxophone player, we never sold brass winds, woodwinds, strings. We started selling woodwinds and brass winds last year, and we're shipping 40,000 instruments out or something this year to students and professionals and all. And a couple other things. We started the whole used gear exchange. Reverb's been around for a long time, and we didn't do anything with really used equipment. And not necessarily wanting to compete with Reverb, but just wanted to take care of our own customers. And it's been wildly successful. So it allowed us to do multiple things at the same time, where I would have been a little more risk adverse and done them one at a time. I'll also say this, and this sounds arrogant, and I apologize for this, but when I was on the bank board, it was very common for an entrepreneur which by the way, when I started, entrepreneur was not even a word. It's a word we've invented in the last 20 years or so. But it's very common for an entrepreneur to get his business to 1 million or maybe even $10 million. And about that point, you bring in a manager to run it. And clearly, when the company gets to $100 million, you've got a team of managers and someone else leading the company. That's very, very common. I got the thing to 1 billion, and I say it was my whole team. It's not me, but we got to 1 billion, 1.5 billion, 1.6 billion, and I'm still the sole owner of this place running the whole thing. It's just absolutely flattering and humbling and scary and every word I can think of to me. And to think about a bunch of professionals coming in and helping us go to the next level and frankly, keeping my baby alive and it's like sending your child off to college. That's what I really feel. And I'm so proud of what Sweetwater has become and continues to be going forward.
And so now you've taken a sort of a side seat. You're not out of there by any stretch of imagination, but you've got a lot of businesses. I looked at 12 of them. You tell me 20. I mean, I guess I didn't do my research thoroughly enough. A lot of them in aviation. You got sweet cars. How do you do it? I mean, are you busier now than you were then?
I am way busier than I am now. I don't even know how I would be at Sweetwater today. And I did a few of these in the last several years at Sweetwater, but I've got a great bunch of people today that work for me. We have about 500 people that manage all the various businesses, and there's a general manager for each one. But I'm very blessed. Every one of them is very successful, and it's all about the basics, just zooming in and fine tuning, making sure the stores look good, businesses look good, treat customers well, do the right thing. The same principles I talked about for Sweetwater, and they're working on every other business I have. And several of the businesses I have were failing businesses. That's why I acquired them. They were not doing well, and we've been able to turn them around and do 3 and 4 times the business they were when I acquired them. So.
Yeah, and a lot of them they're all local, and I've seen you taken some distressed properties, rebuilt them, fortified the business. You love Indiana, Chuck. You really do.
I do love Indiana. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to do business. There's just so much opportunity. But I got to tell you, I get to travel also, and there's opportunity all over the country. I don't know about all over the world. I haven't been there yet, but all over the country, there's just great opportunity. People just need to step up, work hard, apply themselves, do the basics, and man, I just love seeing opportunity everywhere.
And speaking of opportunity, you do a lot of philanthropy, um, and especially with education. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to our audience about your foundation and some of the things you guys are doing.
Sure. So when I sold the majority of Sweetwater, we put a whole bunch of that money into a foundation to help others. And we've done that personally for a long time, but to do a foundation that keeps rejuvenating itself and keep growing was exciting. And so there's really 4 pillars of our foundation. One is just human and children welfare. I can't imagine we live in supposedly one of the greatest countries in the world, and yet we still have hunger, we still have homelessness. And yet every one of us that's on this call today, every one of us could be one disaster or one bad example away of being in that situation. And I think all of us, no matter what our ability, what our personal financial situation, we all should be able to give back and help others. And so I cringe at the idea that people would be hungry. And so that's one of our pillars. Another one is arts. And so we're doing a lot of fun stuff. We've supported every arts organization in our community for a long time. And just recently, last week, opened up the Pearl Street Art Center. It's a 40,000 square foot building. We've completely remodeled. It's got a 400-person room in it that is a multi-purpose performance space with variable acoustics. But most importantly, we have 18 lesson rooms where mainly children, but it'll be young and adult too. But we've started initially with going to our most impoverished schools in Fort Wayne and saying we want to give music lessons to the kids no matter what their ability to pay is. So we were hoping to have 100 students this fall. We immediately started with 370 students, and
Wow.
we've only gone to a small part of the school system, and eventually we'll go to all the other schools. But it's just going to be a place where we can show children the possibilities, and whether they become a professional musician or just have an aptitude to want to listen to it, hear it, enjoy it, it's just going to make them a better person for their lives. And you look at in our impoverished part of Fort Wayne, the way these young men and women think about getting out of Fort Wayne is NBA or NFL or WNBA. And we're just saying arts is another possibility to get out of your community, out of your environment. And so I'm just really excited about that. And then mental health is another pillar of our organization. A lot of those people that I talked about being homeless are suffering with mental health. We all have mental health issues in our family one way or another somewhere. And so we're just trying to help with that. And then finally, economic development. And so we just finished building an $85 million apartment building, 7 floors, parking garage, beautiful. Just a way to help make our downtown a better place. So we're trying to do lots of economic development. So those are the 4 pillars of our foundation.
That is awesome. So we're almost done, almost out of time here. What about some of the challenges you see for Sweetwater going forward? With anything you see in particular or in general?
Challenges going forward, there's always competition, some good, some not so good. Amazon is the big juggernaut that everybody worries about. Although I would challenge everyone on this call, just focus on what you do well and do what you do well. Find things that you do differently. Out Amazon. There's no way you're going to compete. We used to compete against Guitar Center. I couldn't be Guitar Center. There's no way I'd have, the 300, 400 stores they have. There's just no way I could do that. So I was going to do my own thing. And I would say the same thing with Amazon. Does that mean give lessons? Does that mean create communities? We have even though we're in Fort Wayne, Indiana, you can't imagine the community that we have in our own building. There's jazz nights, there's country nights, there's all kinds of clubs and people coming in and doing group lessons and just really, really part of the community. And every local store can do that better than Amazon, better than Sweetwater in their own markets, so on and so forth. And so, that is one of the challenges is competition like that. There's a challenge of just the younger crowd and not using the phone as much as I don't think my daughter who's 18 has ever used a telephone to make a phone call. It's only used for texting for her. And yet a lot of our business is done on the phone today. We're calling customers up. And so we have to work with those dynamics a little bit. There's the challenges of manufacturers selling direct. We're always going to have to battle that. But, I think we do things so much better than the manufacturers. If I were a customer, and I say this obviously with some bias, but if you buy from Sweetwater, you get a 2-year warranty. If you buy from Sweetwater, you get people that'll do technical support. If you buy from Sweetwater, I can combine, brand A, B, and C together in one box and get them to your home, safely and cheaply. And I can tell you how they all work together. If you just buy from a manufacturer, all they're going to really know is their product. And so I think there's a lot of advantages to buying from us versus the manufacturer. I think every store on here should figure out how to do that. Just outdo what the manufacturers do.
You forgot to talk about the candy.
Candy, yes, we put candy in every box. We've done that for decades and decades. It's just a sweet way of saying thank you. And there's been so many fun stories, from me going to visit customers and the little boy or little girl comes running out. I love you. You're Mr. Candy Man. I tell my mom or my dad to buy. I've seen stories of people going into diabetic comas and realizing that they have candy that, it just goes on and on and on. We keep track of this is the kind of personalization we do. We keep track of what kind of candy people like. So if they tell us they like root beer barrel floats, from that point forward, they get root beer barrel floats. They like Smarties, they'll get Smarties. And we'll do whatever they want. Can't do chocolate. Chocolate's a little hard to ship in the summertime. It might melt, but we try and do what people like, and we personalize down to that level. So
That's awesome. We're going to open up for a few questions here. While we're doing that, there's another challenge coming in from outside of the country, Team U and some of these Chinese brands coming in. Any thoughts on that?
Well, they're Chinese brands. Yeah, they're selling stuff ridiculously cheap right now. They're really cheap products, and many of them are not very good. I think some are, but we can go back 30, 40 years. We said that about Japanese products, and today Japanese products are some great instruments. So I do think we have to be on our game. But again, I would focus on what we do really well. I mean, sell the major brands that we're selling today are still really major brands, Tascam and Fender and Paul Reed Smith. And well, I'm going to leave a whole bunch, I'm going to leave several thousand out, but sell those brands and it's worth it. The customer's going to get a better product, a better experience. And frankly, if they get a better product and a better experience, they're going to like you better, and they're more than likely going to come back to your store. And so they're just great, great brands. And we're fortunate we're in a business where there are so many great brands.
Hmm. We have a question from the chat. Guys, you put your questions in the chat. We only have Chuck for a few more minutes. Are there plans to increase the outreach of the educational in-sync program?
Yes, we're working hard on that. We've hired a lot of education reps around the country. That's how we're selling all the band instruments. And we're taking on the world for band instruments right now, band and orchestra.
Are there any plans to sell products outside of the United States in the short term?
Our model is based, as you said, having that one-on-one relationship. And so that means time zone and language and all those become barriers if you start going outside of our country. Frankly, there's so much business in the US. We're kind of staying focused right now in the US. And if we did more, we'd probably jump into Canada and Mexico, but I'm not even predicting that. We're staying in the US, and we're making sure we do a good job with the kind of products we sell now, and expanding the line a little bit. I said the band instruments we took on last year, and just a few months ago, we started selling hi-fi audio, video kind of stuff. And so that'll branch us out a little bit more in the US. But I don't anticipate going overseas for a long time, maybe. There's some great resellers around the world. Why would I want to go compete with them when there's great business here in the US?
Mhm. What do you think of the future of brick and mortar?
I think there will always be a place for great brick and mortar. I really do. And again, whether it's in the music products industry or any other business, if you execute really, really well, you will be successful. You'll find your lane. If you're mediocre or don't bring any value to the table, I remember in the early days, people would say, "How dare you come to my town? I own this town." Well, nobody owns a town. You earn a town, maybe. And that's what I would say. If you're doing a great job, you'll be fine. If you're just expecting business to walk in your door because you hang a sign up, yeah, I think you got more trouble than Sweetwater. You got Amazon, you got Temu, you got everybody else coming after you. So just do your job really, really, really well, and no one will be able to take it from you. But that means, sponsoring the minor league baseball or the local little league. That means sponsoring all the musical events at the school. That means being open late night for trial fittings and all those kind of things that you need to do to be a part of your community.
What kind of advice would you give to your younger self, the younger Chuck?
Ooh, I don't know. How can I look back and have much regret? I would say the one thing is I did do everything myself in serial order very slowly. I got the first one done, then I'd go to the next one. I wish I would have been slightly more aggressive and uh, and maybe borrowed some more money early. I'm pretty debt adverse, so I've tried not to have many loans through the years. But if I'd have borrowed some money and jump started the business a little bit earlier, maybe it would have gotten bigger faster. But I have no complaints where we are. And I'm just so thankful to be in such a great business, a great industry. I love going to the NAMM show and just seeing so many of my friends and competitors, and many of our competitors are customers and great employees. It's just been a fabulous business. I'm so thankful.
And you're the king. Um, how do you stay how do you stay relevant in such a fast changing industry, and how do you keep up with emerging trends?
Woo, great question. Um, I haven't mentioned so far, I don't sleep a lot. A typical night for me is about 3.5 hours of sleep. And so I do have another whole life when the rest of the world is sleeping. I'm just genuinely interested in all kinds of things. I read about 4 to 5 inches of material every day, both printed material and online, hours online. And so I'm pretty in touch with most technologies, most new things, and the news. And it's just my thirst. I'm always interested in getting better and improving. I'm always learning stuff. I learned to fly helicopters at age 50, and I'm just always loving to learn and get better.
Any advice for music stores trying to sell online, software online, considering that you've been so successful selling software online yourself?
Just do it. Just do it. If you don't do it, you'll never get it done. And obviously, what Ray's been able to do with Exchange has been so incredible, helpful, and you can do that no matter what size your business is. But just do it.
How do you feel about AI, and do you think it will impact both sales and music production?
It will, it is, it has already. AI has, like everything, it has its really good things about it and it has some bad things about it, but I use AI every day. It clearly helps me write responses to emails faster. It helps me when I'm doing a speech or presentation to think about what I'm going to say. I don't read it directly off of AI, but it'll prod my memory. And it's clearly coming, and you see it all the time now, the way descriptions of products are being written and all that. And what it's going to take is a more intelligent AI. In fact, I heard in December, there's going to be a version of AI coming out that's like 100 times more powerful and more relevant than ChatGPT is. Just
Wow.
2 months away from now,
Wow.
100 times more.
Wow.
And that's going to get close to like human brain thinking, but we're not there yet. And it'll always take humans to proofread the text and make sure it's really right and accurate and so on and so forth. It's amazing how good it can be, and it's amazing how bad it can be at the same time.
Wow.
I love
Um,
AI. AI will make people be more productive if it's used well.
I agree. I agree, and I think the more we use AI, actually, the better everything is going to be.
Yeah.
We seem to be in an era of good enough. How do we convince the next generation of the value of higher standards and excellence?
Ooh, I love that question. For me, good enough is not good enough. Everything I do, we try and do top shelf. And I don't know. I hope that it rubs off. I hope when they see examples of excellence, that they'll aspire to that. But that is a real question, a real concern. But everything I do, there's never a question of how do we do it, whether it's the last 40 years at Sweetwater or the last 3 years and other stuff. If I'm going to do it, no one ever questioned. We're just going to do it the best way we can do it. And that way we never have to apologize. We never have to compromise. I don't know how that's going to affect the next generation, but hopefully they see it and will respect it and grow that way themselves.
Mm-hmm. Uh, some people say our competition is not other music stores, but video games and other non-music interests that young people have. Do you think we're creating enough musicians, young musicians?
Well, of course, we're not creating enough young music. We always need more. But that being said, yes, I've always said 20 years ago that our competition was not other music stores. Quite often the business we sell, they don't even know. They weren't even going into another music store. So it's clearly not that, but it is buying a hot tub or a new car or the video games, as you say. I still see a lot of young people when they're presented the option of learning to play a music instrument. It is still inspirational to them. What is difficult is how long it takes to get to where you're good enough to have fun. You can play a video game right away. But I think a lot of it's just exposure. I'm seeing this. We have 1,300 students taking lessons at Sweetwater right now, been taken for years, and the number keeps climbing. I opened up this new music school, I said last week, actually about 3 weeks ago, we opened it with kind of a soft opening, but officially did the ribbon cutting last week. We got 370 students, probably more today, I don't know for sure, but 370 students, and not one of them was going to Sweetwater already for lessons. These were new kids, new possibilities for them. And so, yeah, I think the more we can invest in young people, that's going to be our future. I
Mm,
love young people.
excellent. This is a kind of a interesting question. After watching the Sam Ash interview, what do you think Sam Ash could have done differently?
Who am I to second guess? I am sure it was incredibly tough to be in Richard's shoes and his brother's shoes and all that. They have a whole different cost structure being in New York City and the big stores that they have. Um, I would never want to say anything negative. If it were my stores, I would like them to have been a little neater, a little cleaner, a little more inventory, but I'm not in their shoes. I don't know how difficult that would have been. But if I would have done it, that's what I would have done. But I'm not one to give advice. I'm just talking about what I would do if they were my stores.
All right, we're going to wrap it up, guys. Chuck, it's great to have you. Any final advice for all our music retailers and vendors on this call from you, sir?
What I would say is I understand how challenging the times are. I understand how scary they are. Hopefully we'll get through our presidential election next week and we'll be on the path of good again. Right now, there's so much turmoil everywhere, but I would just encourage everyone. I mean, you get a chance every day to make a difference in other people's lives. You can wake up and decide it's going to be a good day or a bad day. I don't have bad days. I have good days every day, and I try and encourage and foster that sort of healthy feeling all around me all the time. And it just seems to breed other healthy feeling. And so I would just encourage, never give up. Anything's possible. Failure is not an option. So, Ray, thanks for having me on today. Everybody, all my friends, everybody here, thanks for reaching out and being here. And if you ever want to reach out to me personally, my email is chuck@surack, SURACK.com, chuck@surack.com, and you'll see I respond right away.
Well, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for agreeing to do this. And it's been an absolutely wonderful 1.5 hours. It actually flew by like
Awesome.
nothing. Thank you so much,
Went
Chuck.
fast.
Have
Thank you.
another one of your great days.
I will.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chuck. Really appreciate that, man.
You're welcome. Hope it's helpful.
All right. Take care.
Bye.